Hello, I'm Balash. So, we're Group 8 from Section F. So, Section DEF, are you ready for a surprise quiz? Well, you'll have to. First question. Guess who am I? At the age of 15, I became the youngest Grandmaster ever and the youngest candidate for World Championship. No. Okay, second hint. I am the only person to ever have won 3 chess Oscars. No. Okay, final hint. The movie Pawn Sacrifice was based on my life. Any takers? Okay, it's Bobby Fischer. One more question. Let's take it easy this time. I'm an American mathematician with significant contributions to game theory. Yes, correct. Many of you people would recognize these grades. But do you know what happened to them? Bobby Fischer became so paranoid that he regularly used to take out his entire apartment to just look for bugs. At one point in his career, he took out all the fillings of his teeth just in fear that the CIA was spying on him. He spent much of his later life in hiding and seclusion in countries such as Yugoslavia, Japan, and the Philippines. And with John Nash, well, he suffered delusions and hallucinations and was later diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He used to believe that all the people who wore red ties were plotting a communist conspiracy against him. And he spent much of his later life in psychiatric hospitals. Isn't it heartbreaking to see these greats, legendary in their respective fields, go through such a phase like this? My friend Sanchali here will now explain the reasons behind it.
So a lot of you here believe that obsession is good for you, that it helps you to achieve new zeniths in life. But reflect on that for a bit. Is it really obsession you're talking about, or is it passion? Because there is a stark difference between the two. So obsession is when you have no control over unwanted thoughts and behavior. But passion is when you take deliberate decisions regarding your interests. Now there are less severe forms of obsession, very petty, everyday things. Like I, for instance, like to brush 3 to 4 times a day. My friend Zilia, who is an in-house architect, she spent close to an hour trying to perfect the Pookalam circle during Onam. And Mark Mahalingam here, he likes to place his chess pieces in the exact center of the squares. So these are really petty forms, but there are severe forms as well. Something known as OCD, something that you all must be acquainted with. So let us look at what the world in general thinks of OCD. Let us look at what social media thinks that OCD is. So these are some of the images that I found when I searched for the hashtag OCD on Instagram. So according to people, things such as keeping a clean room or a well-arranged fridge or having a health drink regularly are basically representative of a disease, a very serious disease that has actually afflicted 5 million Americans. So there is a lot of dilution of this phrase because people don't really understand its significance. So obsession happens when you have, OCD happens when you have recurring uncomfortable thoughts which lead to compulsive behavior, which leads to wastage of a lot of productive time during the day that you could have possibly devoted to something else. Now, just to make you believe that it is actually a disease and not a mere whim or fancy that people have, let's proceed to the next slide, where I'll take you through the actual scientific basis of the disease. So what happens is that there are 4 areas in the brain which are associated with OCD. So there's the orbital cortex, and there are 3 other areas deep inside the brain. The orbital cortex is responsible for sending signals to the other 3 parts. But what happens in case of OCD is that this part becomes hyperactive and it sends a lot of repeated false alarms. And this leads to a lot of repetitive, uncontrolled movement, like movement of the limbs and churning of the stomach and a faster heart rate. And that again leads to wastage of a lot of productive time for the individual. My friend Satpal will take you over the different kinds of OCD that exist.
Good evening, my friends. There are different kinds of obsession. One of them is inward oriented, another is outward oriented. I am here to explain you about the inward-oriented obsession. Inward-oriented obsession is when a person gets obsessed with something that he feels should be right and is obsessed within himself. That is, he is not obsessed by another particular person or a celebrity. But it can be very petty, like keeping things in a particular order, or just fear of certain kind of germs. In this, you can see different photos which depict inward-oriented obsession. One of them is Heath Ledger. He made himself famous by playing the cult of Joker, and he basically locked himself up in his apartment for a month just to prepare himself mentally and get galvanized in the role that he had to play. Recently, his diary and images of his diary were released, and many disturbing things were found. Very disturbing articles were found inside his diary. And he later died of drug overdose a few weeks before he received Oscar posthumously. Another image that you can see is that of gambling. Newly research suggests that gambling is a product of genetic and behavioral links. Individuals with obsessive compulsive behaviors or similar forms, like keeping things in a particular order or fear of certain kind of germs, are more likely to meet the diagnostic criteria for gambling disorders. Another thing is that of anorexia, that is the fear of food over a certain level. From holiday parties to gift exchanges, food plays a very key role in our life. But some people get particularly uncomfortable when they have the idea of eating a particular kind of food, or eating over a particular caloric intake when they try to measure their weight much more times a day. And this shows an industry, that is the fashion industry, in which this type of obsession is more prevalent. Another image we can see is that of the movie Black Swan. In this movie, it can be perceived as a metaphor for achieving artistic perfection and the psychological and the physical challenges that it inflicts on the artist, and also the price that has to be paid for it. In this movie, the lead actress gets selected for a lead role in a movie, and then she descends into obsession, and ultimately she had to recuperate herself. And so my friend Zilia will take over the stage.
So, obsession can also be outwardly. It can be projected to somebody. So, we would like to show a very short clip and depict how Bollywood have romanticized the obsessive act of stalking and eve-teasing.
ये उसका स्टाइल होएगा होठों पे ना दिल में ना होएगा
I think you mean दिल में हाँ होएगा
I think I said दिल में ना होएगा
You sure about this दिल में हाँ होएगा
Bro, why don't you get दिल में ना होएगा
ये उसका स्टाइल होएगा होठों पे ना दिल में हाँ होएगा होठों पे ना दिल पे हाँ होएगा होठों पे ना दिल पे हाँ
So, it's really nice to have an admirer in our life. We all strive for lots of love and attention, but to what extent? He bombs you with messages. He has no sense of personal boundaries. He spies on you on every chance he gets. He constantly compares you to this impossible ideal. He becomes angry and violent when you reject him. He initiates his way into your life by helping you in every possible way. And he doesn't understand when you say no is no. You try to contact him and tell him to stop, but he ignores this. And he thinks that his way of expressing this obsessiveness is a way of expressing commitment and love. So, what are the consequences? The consequences could be very harsh, despite the fact that a person who's obsessed, being told to stay away, maybe even get a restraining order, they tend to ignore and they don't realize the problem they are suffering from. So these can lead to very harsh consequences like suicide, acid attacks, rape, and even homicide.
I think my friend was getting too emotional there. to conclude, too much darkness can kill. Too much light can cause blindness. There are people who can survive with one chocolate or by smoking once or twice a week or even with one glass of wine. But for many people, one is not even an option. So those are the people we are talking about. What we saw from the examples of Nash and Bobby Fischer is that when love crosses the limit of obsession, it creates more destructive effects than constructive ones. And our previous group also pointed out madness in love and other arenas like politics can even cause more destructive impacts. So what could be the solution? So this involves two phases. So first is the detection and second is treating it. So to detect it, there can be two ways. One is through self-realization and other is when your friends or relatives point it at you. The solution could be, the treatment could be, that psychiatrists point out that antidepressants could solve this a bit, and also they ask patients to use behavioral strategies to realize within themselves they are repeating something and to be conscious of diverting their mind to something else. So don't forget, in between love and madness lies the obsession. Thanks.